Howdy folks, hope you all had a great weekend and welcome to another episode of Mingles with Jingles. And I'm very happy to say that this episode of Mingles with Jingles has got itself a sponsor. Hopefully you're all aware by now that I don't accept sponsorships unless it's from a company or a product that I either use myself or am entirely happy to recommend to you, or both, and that is the case with today's sponsor, Incogni. Now, I'm sure you're all aware that every time you go on the internet, your personal data is being harvested by data brokers and sold on to, well, basically anybody who will pay for it. Usually, things like insurance companies or credit companies, making it harder for you to get credit and raising your insurance premiums without you even knowing anything about it. It's also possible that you may be aware that under most legal jurisdictions you're entitled to go after these data brokers and demand that they remove any information about you that they hold on file. Now that's fine in theory, but it's a lot harder in practice because, well, do you even know who these data brokers are? I mean, I didn't, but they knew who I was. And that's where Incogni comes in, because Incogni does all of the hard work for you. Incogni goes after the data brokers, submitting demands that they remove any data that they hold on file for you, and I'm actually pretty good about taking care of my online data. So when I signed up for Incogni's service, I wasn't particularly surprised to find that 69 data brokers that Incogni went after didn't actually hold any data on me, but a further 26 did. And Incogni not only got them to remove any of my personal data, they also slapped them with a suppression order to ensure that they couldn't accidentally re-add me back to their lists in the future, and they keep checking up on them to ensure that they comply with these legal requirements because, oh, would you look at that, sometimes some of them don't. So head over to incogni.com/jingles and use code JINGLES to get an exclusive offer of 60% off. That's incogni.com/jingles and use code JINGLES, or just click the link below to take your personal data off the market. So, what's been going on in the world this week? Well, the world of gaming at least. Quite a bit actually, but before we get on to that, something a little bit more personal, although probably applicable, in fact definitely applicable to all of us. I use internet banking just because it's really convenient. I've got a mobile banking app on my phone and so on and so on and so on. I've noticed over the last couple of months, every time I log into my bank account from the PC, it keeps telling me your credit score is updated and inviting me to go and take a look at my credit options. Now, just to give you a bit of context here, I don't do credit. I don't even have an overdraft on my current account. Not because I can't have one, but because I don't want to have one. Back when I was young and stupid and I first joined the Navy, I got myself into all kinds of debt with loans I couldn't afford for things I didn't need and so on and so on. Basically, young and stupid. And it took me a long time to pay off all of those debts. So long, in fact, that by the time I finished paying those debts off, I'd basically spent my first 10 years or so in the Navy paying all of those debts off. And I'd gotten used to not having a lot of money and living within my means. So when I finally paid those debts off, it was like suddenly being promoted 2 ranks without all the extra responsibility and just with all of the extra money. And because I'd spent so long basically managing without a huge amount of cash available, I continued doing that and just started saving all of the extra money. It was great. In fact, I remember in particular, the last time I got posted down the Falkland Islands at the Royal Air Force Base, Mount Pleasant there, because I was posted to a billet that was 1 rank higher than the rank I actually held, so I was getting substitution pay for the higher rank. I was getting what they call in the Navy LSSB, Longer Service at Sea bonus. It basically meant an extra £10 a day while being deployed because of the length of time that I'd accumulated being deployed in my previous 15 years in the Navy. So what it effectively meant is that for the 6 months I was down there, I was used to being paid, or at least having the effective take-home pay once my loan repayments had been taken into account, of somebody who was 1 rank lower than I actually was. But I was now in a billet that was being paid as somebody who was 1 rank higher than I actually was, and then with all of the separation bonuses and stuff on top of that for being deployed away, I was essentially used to being paid 1 rank lower effectively being paid two and a half ranks higher. And of course, when you're down the Falklands, there's nothing to spend all of that money on anyway, even if I wanted to, and I didn't. Well, nothing other than beer. And trust me, plenty of people down the Falklands try to spend all of that extra money on beer, because it's all duty-free down there as well. It's extremely cheap. Anyway, long story short, I came back from that deployment with a lot of money saved up, and I wasn't used to spending it, because my bad experience with predatory loans when I was a lot younger turned me off the idea of credit entirely. I never even had an overdraft on my bank account, I didn't have a credit card, and so on and so on and so on, because basically I no longer did credit. So over the last couple of months when I've been logging into my online bank account, I keep seeing all of these "your credit score has updated" notifications. I was kind of curious. What exactly is my credit score? It's not something that I've ever really been interested in, but the bank certainly seems to be trying to get me interested. So I'd click the link and go and look. And apparently my credit score, and remember, I'm a person who doesn't do credit, right? I don't owe people money. I haven't owed anybody, well, with the exception of the mortgage on this house, for the last at least 20 years, I have not been in debt to anybody for anything. And my credit score is just okay. And that really offended me. I mean, I don't really care that much, because I'm not interested in going into debt, borrowing money from anybody, or using credit anyway. I mean, I've gotten used to, if I can't afford it, I can't have it. Simple as that. And if I want it, I save up the money for it, and then I buy it. I don't do credit. So I'm not really interested in obtaining a line of credit, but the fact that my credit score was only okay kind of offended me a little. I thought, how dare you? I mean, I've spent the last 20 years demonstrating that I am in fact a very good debt. I mean, shit that I owe gets paid instantly, or it just never gets owed in the first place. And to a degree, I suppose, this kind of makes sense, because I do not have a history of debt. Certainly not in this century, anyway. So, I don't have a history of repaying loans in this century for them to base the credit rating on. But surely the fact that I don't go into debt by itself should be a good indication that I'm a reasonably safe bet, and yet apparently it isn't. So I thought, I'm going to investigate this further. So there was a button you could click on, ways to improve your credit score. Okay, guess what those ways are? Go into debt. And then demonstrate that you can repay the debt. But hang on a minute. I've been paying a mortgage off every month without fail for the last 18 months. But apparently this isn't enough evidence. No. They want me to get their credit cards. They want me to take their loans. Oh, right, I get it. This isn't a, oh, by the way, your credit score is updated. Let's see what a good boy you are. This is, let us sell you some more of our products kind of thing. I get it. And while I was digging around, I noticed something else as well. There's no interest rate on my current account. I should stress, I'm not talking about interest that they charge me. That would be very, very bad. No, I'm talking about interest that they pay me on the balance of my current account. Now, for anybody who's less than, 40 years old, that might seem like a completely alien concept. But there was a time when you would get paid interest on any balance that you kept in your current account. Remember my very, very first bank account. Back when I was in high school, before I joined the Navy, I worked a part-time job at a local supermarket which had its own bank. And so I opened an account at that bank in the supermarket in order to get paid into the bank account. And that bank account, the current account, this was 1986 by the way, so it was a fair while ago. But that current account, in 1986, here in the UK, paid a monthly interest rate of 5%. Today, nothing. So I thought, okay, well, I have a savings account as well. Let's take a quick look at that. Now, I didn't have a savings account in 1986. But here in the UK, in January 1986, the average interest rate on a savings account was 12%. Do you know what it is today? And it's probably no different in the USA or well, anywhere else. But today, the interest rate on my savings account, you ready for this? I hope you're sitting down. Because if these aren't details that you've actually checked for yourself recently, this may come as something of a shock. Remember, 1986, 12%. 2023, it's not 12%. Although there is a 1 in it. Actually, there are 2 ones. It's not 11%. It's 1.1%. That's a fairly substantial drop. So what's happened in those intervening years between 1986 and 2023 that's caused the banks to quite dramatically stop paying us for the privilege of depositing our money with them? Well, they've crashed the world economy at least once, taken billions of dollars, well, probably globally trillions of dollars from various different taxpayers in order to bail themselves out without repaying any of that money. They're no longer paying us interest on money that we give them in order for them to trade and invest and enrich themselves. Hang on a minute, Jingles, I thought you said this was all to do with your credit rating. Well, it is kind of related, because one of the other ways that the bank said I could improve my credit rating was to get a credit card. So, I mean, I'm not going to get a credit card because I certainly don't need one. But again, I was curious, so I went to investigate the options. Do you know what interest they're charging on credit cards? Remember, they went from a 12% rate of interest paid to you on your savings account in 1986 to a 1.1%, or in other words, completely negligible rate of interest on your savings account today. And they're charging you, if you make a purchase on a credit card and all you do is pay off the interest, over the course of a year, the annual percentage rate up to 24%. So if you buy something for $1,000, it will cost you $240 on top of the $1,000 to repay it. Huh. And what's my incentive here? So I can get a good credit rating instead of an okay one. Yeah, no, I don't think so. I'm good, thanks. I'm fine. I've been managing without the bank's predatory interest rates just fine for at least the last quarter century. I'm good. No thank you. Thanks, but no thanks. Well, anyway, in other news, Overwatch 2 came out on Steam, and within a day got review bombed so badly that it mostly instantly became the lowest scoring game on Steam. After being out for just over a week, obviously the game itself has been out for longer than that, but it's only been on Steam for just over a week. In that space of time, it's received 150,000 reviews, only 9% of which, sorry, not 9, that would be terrible. 9% isn't good. Only 9% of those reviews have anything good to say about it. Now that's kind of not entirely fair. I mean, I can understand the review bombing, and I can sympathise with the review bombing. But Overwatch 2 isn't a terrible game. Overwatch 2's problem is, and always has been, that it isn't actually Overwatch 2. It's just Overwatch 1.5. It's kind of an update to the original Overwatch that removes a whole bunch of features, promised a whole bunch of new features that got everybody really excited, which they never delivered and are never going to deliver, and then stuffs the whole thing full of predatory microtransactions and monetization. And that's why everybody hates Overwatch 2. And then, of course, there's the whole fact that, although this is, par for the course now when it comes to a Blizzard Activision game launch, the launch was an utter disaster. Although, you know what, they have been getting better. The Wrath of the Lich King Classic launch wasn't bad. The Diablo 4 launch was actually pretty good, but the Overwatch 2 launch? Yeah, we don't like to talk about the Overwatch 2 launch. And yet the thing that amused me most about the Steam launch of Overwatch 2 was the response from the developers, because remember, 150,000 reviews in a week, 91% of which were not complimentary, so naturally the media wanted a comment on this utter disaster of a game launch from the game developers. And so game director Aaron Keller obviously drew the short straw and got thrust out in front of the world's media and delivered this statement. This is how we try to put a positive spin on what is probably the worst game launch on Steam ever. Although being review bombed isn't a fun experience, no shit. Although being review bombed isn't a fun experience, it's been great to see lots of new players jump into Overwatch 2 for the first time. Yeah, there it is. Although, to be fair, despite the overwhelmingly negative reviews, Overwatch 2 on Steam has been seeing pretty respectable player numbers. 50,000 concurrent player numbers on average, which you have to kind of expect in the first week. Battlefield had something like 100,000 players in its first week. It's down to 10,000 now, so it's lost 90% of its players since launch. But at the moment, at least, Overwatch 2 on Steam is holding up pretty well. But let's see what else he had to say. Many of the reviews on Steam mention the cancellation of the much larger component of PvE that was announced in 2019 as one of their primary reasons for dissatisfaction with the game. I get that. That announcement was about an ambitious project that we ultimately couldn't deliver. If we can't turn back the clock, then what can we do? I'm going to stop you there, Aaron. You can turn back the clock. Don't forget, this is Blizzard Activision. They've got more money than God. If they wanted to put PvE content, the content that they promised everybody, that got everybody so excited about Overwatch 2, if they wanted to put it into Overwatch 2, they absolutely could. Let's also not forget that the reason they cited, and I'm not making this up, right, the reason they cited for abandoning the PvE content a year after the launch of the game, after they'd continually strung everybody along, promising that, yeah, it's coming, just, keep spending money in the in-game store, and the PvE content that we promised you in 2019 will be here. The reason that they gave was that they didn't know how to do story. Blizzard Activision. Warcraft 1, 2, and 3. StarCraft. World of Warcraft. And all of its expansions. All story-rich games. Now they don't know how to do story anymore. I'm going to call bullshit on that one. And I believe the evidence supports me on this one. So, anyway, what else did he have to say? If we can't turn back the clock, even though they can, they just won't, then what can we do? We can keep adding to and improving Overwatch 2. They're going to move forward and continually create and innovate on what's making the game great now for the players who are playing now. Like what? What is making the game great now for the players who are playing now? Yep, no further comment. That was it. So basically he said a whole bunch of nothing. And honestly, knowing how these things work, don't forget the guy was basically wheeled out to provide some kind of spin and damage control in response to the Overwatch 2 Steam launch disaster. I wouldn't expect him to say anything concrete. He's basically going out there to spin a whole bunch of nonsense and do damage control. And that's more or less exactly what he did. And honestly, that's all he really needed to do. Because despite the overwhelmingly negative reviews on Steam, despite the negative reviews, despite the overwhelmingly negative community backlash, not just against, the content that has been delivered, the content that hasn't been delivered, despite all of that, the game still has 24.5 million active players every month. That's 24.5 million players every month who potentially are going to spend some money on the in-game store. So why should Blizzard Activision give a shit? They're still doing good business despite feeding us a steady diet of shit. And it's not just Blizzard Activision. I'm using them to make the point here. It's all of the big game developers and publishers. Look at Redfall, published by Bethesda. Look at Fallout 76, developed and published by Bethesda. Before we say no, Bethesda didn't develop it, yes they did. Todd Howard said they did, regardless of what it says on Fallout 76's Wikipedia page. Cyberpunk 2077. I love the game, but I can't really defend it. Look at Battlefield 2048, Star Wars Jedi Survivor. The list goes on and on and on. Just pick any major title produced or published by a AAA developer or publisher in the last 10 years that hasn't been an utter disaster or a massive disappointment, at the very least on launch, and in many cases for several months afterwards. And your list is probably going to be very, very short, and it's probably just going to be Baldur's Gate 3. Although, if you can think of any other big game titles from the last 10 years that weren't complete disasters on launch and weren't Baldur's Gate 3, then I'd be extremely happy to hear about it in the comments, because at the moment I'm struggling to think of any. The original Star Wars Jedi Survivor game. I can't remember what it was called. That was actually pretty good on launch. God knows what happened with the sequel. But yeah, there's another one. That wasn't too bad. It's all our own fault, of course. I mean, we keep encouraging them by continuing to put money in their pockets for feeding us this steady diet of shit. At the very least, we need to stop pre-ordering. I mean, I'm really excited about the expansion. It's coming next month, actually. Yeah, next month for Cyberpunk 2077, the Phantom Liberty expansion. But I'm not pre-ordering it. I'm going to at least wait until the day one reviews are in. I mean, it's probably going to be good. Probably. Because if there's one thing that I have learnt over the last 10 years, even if a developer has a proven track record, don't give them the benefit of the doubt. Don't pre-order, wait for the day one reviews to come in. CD Projekt Red had a fantastic track record, and look at Cyberpunk 2077. BioWare had an amazing track record. Look at Mass Effect Andromeda. What was the other one they did that just failed miserably and sank without trace and failed to deliver on all of the pre-launch hype? Oh yeah, Anthem. Yeah. You can't trust any of them. They're only as good as the last thing they've done. Stop giving them your money until you know the product that you're paying for is actually worth the money. I mean, can you imagine any other industry that tried to treat you the way the games development industry does, with buggy, unfinished, broken, and rushed titles on release? Can you imagine buying a new car, handing over the money, and then it gets delivered and it doesn't have any wheels? Yeah, they're coming next month. In the meantime, don't forget to keep paying for the sat-nav updates. Only half of that actually happens. Or going to the movies. I don't know, there's a new James Cameron science fiction spectacular comes out. Avatar 3. But they haven't done the special effects yet. Yeah, we're patching that in next month. Come back and see it again then. You wouldn't stand for it in any other industry. You need to stop standing for it in the games industry. Because quite frankly, they need to do better. Oh, but you don't understand the pressure we're under. Making games is hard. Yeah, but other games developers, smaller games developers, with a fraction of your budget and a fraction of the development team, seem to be able to put working games out on time, on budget, and without any game-breaking bugs on launch. They can do it. With your resources, you can do it too. The problem, of course, is that for the big publishers and developers, the focus is not on producing a finished game, it's on producing a profitable game. So as long as the in-game store works and new skins keep getting placed in every month, as far as they're concerned, it's job done. It is simply not good enough, and we need to stop encouraging them. Review bombing them is like water off a duck's back. Overwatch 2, lowest reviewed game in Steam's history. Still has 50,000 concurrent players on Steam and 24.5 million players active every month. They don't care about bad reviews. Or what they care about are their profits. You've got to stop putting money in their pockets if you want them to change. Because that is the only language that they understand. As long as they continue to make a profit off you, they will only pretend to care about what you think of them. You have to hit them where it hurts, if you want them to change for the better. And on that bombshell, that's it for this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's given you something to talk about. And as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.